So we wanted to give you a few hints, not all of the answers, but some hints about how to answer your Unit 5 Don't Forget. So we'll give you kind of the beginning of the word, and that way you should be able to check to see if you're right. So the point isn't that we're giving you all the answers, but that we're giving you a way to check to know if you're right. So Miss Luana?
Okay, so number 1 says all of the things are classified into 3 different, and that's going to start with the letter D.
And remember, this is one of the levels of classification. It's actually the one above kingdom. So it's one of the biggest levels of classification.
Number 2, domain blank contains 4 kingdoms of blank organisms. So this is going to be domain the E, and contains 4 kingdoms of E type of organisms. So thinking about the cell type.
And so keep in mind, all of these numbers 1 through 8 are actually going to go along with your notes on pages 97 and 98. So 1 through 8 go along with pages 97 through 98. So if you're not sure, go back to 97 through 98.
Number 3, domain A contain bacteria that live in extreme environments.
And so it's really important to kind of underline or identify this idea of extreme, because both this domain and one that isn't listed here, because there are 3 different of these and only 2 are listed here. One of them contains our normal or true bacteria, and that one is not listed. So you just want to be able to remember, how do I know if this bacteria is a blank or a blank?
So then with number 4, again, thinking of those types of cells, it says kingdoms will have A and E contain our prokaryotic cells. So it's very specific there. Number 5, kingdom P. P includes our eukaryotic cells that are plant-like, fungi-like, and animal-like.
And so really, in order to be able to solve 5 through 8 or 4 through 8, you kind of want to look at the big picture. So the next kingdom includes heterotrophic organisms that are decomposers. So this is going to be the kingdom that starts with the letter F. And we do really want to know that they are decomposers, that they help break down waste. Then we have organisms that have a cellulose cell wall. Now these organisms are also, we want to add in the word autotrophic. And so this is going to be a kingdom that starts with a P as well, but they have a cell wall and they always make their own food. Versus the last kingdom includes organisms that never have a cell wall. That's going to start with an A, meaning that these are the organisms that never have cell wall, and their cells are going to be more flexible, meaning they can move. So we see these organisms are very motile.
Number 9, the 3 main organs of the plant are going to be starts with the letter S, R, and we also can have an F right there. Or
This would probably be the L, right? Because remember, only some organisms have the flower, but all organisms have S, R, and L. And so think about, if you draw a plant, what are the 3 main parts that you draw?
Number 10, the leaf and stem cells have organelles that are going to start with a C, and they're going to perform a function that starts with a P.
So what we want to think about when we're trying to study number 10 is, what do the leaf and stem do that this other organ does not do? And so since these 2 organs get light and the other organ is below the ground, these 2 organs are able to do something that the others can't. And that something turns out to be photosynthesis. And this is the process of turning. And so we're just going to go ahead and start the molecule. It's not just carbon. It's carbon blank gas. And another reactant. So photosynthesis uses light, carbon, a special type of gas, and a liquid that starts with H2. And then we're going to build starts with an S, or it could start with a C. So it's going to build a blank or a carb that the plant uses to build its body or might use later in respiration. Now, in order to get the water up the plant and in order to move the food down the plant, some plants use tubes that start with an X and a P. Remember, this X is actually going to be XY something something. And so it makes it sound kind of like xylophone. It sounds like a Z, but it starts with XY. And so what we're looking at in 10 through 19, 10 through 19, this is going to be section 5.2. And this is where we're looking at plants and how are plants alive and how do we know that plants are alive. And so we're kind of checking our vocabulary knowledge here.
For number 13, small portion of plants that start with an S are for gas exchange, but something that starts with an H2 can be lost.
And so, again, we're trying to think of how do plants transport, how do plants synthesize, how do plants excrete. Remember, they're losing a gas that is a waste product for them. And then we look at how plants regulate. So remember, hormones are going to help regulate plant growth. These hormones might start with an A to help cells elongate. They might start with a C to help cells divide. Or they might start with an E to help fruit ripen.
For number 15, we're still talking a little bit about their regulation, how they respond. And so your plants are going to show something that starts with a P, one of our tropisms, when they're going towards light, but they can also respond to gravity and to touch.
And so you do need to know the terms that end in tropism, like gravitropism and thigmotropism, and the one that's in response to light, because it's actually going to talk about how plants are able to regulate in response to their environment. Next, when we talk about plant nutrition, they are considered autotrophs, and it has to do with how they get their food. So this one's kind of a hard one to fill in, but it's because plants make their own food. Next we have blank and blank both have seeds but store them differently. These are names of two types of plants. The first type starts with an A. These are going to store their seeds in a fruit. The second types with a G, and they're going to store their seeds in cones. And so they have a similar structure, but they use it a little bit differently. Finally, we have some plants use animals to help with blank, and what we want to pay attention to is the transfer of the pollen. So remember that the pollen is made at the anther, but it needs to get to the stigma. And so some plants are going to use animals to help with this, and the process starts with a P.
For 19, angiosperms are a type of plant that have a blank with a male and female part to attract pollinators.
And that kind of wraps us up with plants there. So we should have been able to identify how plants synthesize, transport, excrete, regulate, get nutrition, grow. One thing that's not on here is germination. So how does it go from a seed to a full mature plant? Respiration and reproduction. And then we move on to talk about animals. And that goes all the way down to number 27. So 20 through 27 is from 5.3.
So for 20, animals digest food and then they use the organ that starts with an I to absorb nutrients into the blood.
So remember, for animals, nutrition isn't just eating food, it's also getting it into the bloodstream. Something else that has to get into the bloodstream is going to be oxygen. So when we talk about gas exchange, animals need to get oxygen in, and they have in gills and lungs, these are their structures. So amphibians have gills, land animals have lungs, but the lungs both have large blank, and it starts with SA, so that respiratory gas exchange can happen really quickly. Once the food is in the bloodstream and the oxygen is in the bloodstream, we need to transport the blood. So animals have a muscle that starts with an H that can be divided into chambers to separate oxygenated blood from deoxygenated blood. Meaning the heart and the lungs are going to work really closely together so that when the blood actually goes out to the body, it definitely has oxygen. But in order to push it out, we need to use the structure that starts with an H.
So then waste.
Priscilla Wenbo, please come to the front office. Priscilla Wenbo. Teachers, if she's with you, please call the front office.
Q again, before it can be excreted. 24, the most efficient at excreting waste because they make only solid waste. This is an organism that starts with an I. 25, blank can be hermaphrodites. These start with an E, but they still use internal fertilization with another mate. 26, both insects and amphibians are going to use blank to change their body shapes, and this process starts with an M. And then 27, specialized cells called blank help transmit signals due to their long shape. This is a special type of cell that starts with an N.
And so that kind of wraps up the main thing that we need to know about animals. What we are really focusing on is Sternberg again. How do animals meet their needs? But what structures do they use? So by the time you're done with this, you should be working on the vocabulary with the names of the structures. Finally, 28 through 36 looks at animal behavior and how animals respond to stimuli. Some behaviors are present at birth and require no practice. And this type of behavior starts with an I. Examples of this type of behavior include all the way, these two are examples. Movement towards or away from a stimulus starts with a T, kind of reminds you of a yellow car that drives you around. Animals will also instinctively try to attract a blank that starts with an M, or defend their land or space, which starts with a T.
For 31, behaviors that start with an L require practice. And for 32, learning to stop a behavior if there's no reward or punishment starts with a, starts with an H.
Yeah, and so this is one that we'll be talking about tomorrow. We haven't covered 31 through 36 yet. But we want to kind of give you a little bit of a preview. Operant conditioning is also called trial and so I'll just leave this part blank. It means you have to try it didn't work, try it didn't work. Classical conditioning is learning to, starts with an A, and it means to group things together, so to make a connection between them, but this word starts with an A. Imprinting is a combination of two major types of behavior, those that you're born knowing and those that you have to practice.
And then communication can include the use of chemicals, such as insects' use of what starts with a P. Okay. And so that's it for today, and make sure you get started studying.